with us. Hi, Swati. I hope you're feeling better. We're just getting started. How's Dehradun, dude? Is it cold?
It's pretty nippy in the evenings, yeah. It's there's 2-3 hours in a day when it's quite warm and you sort of need fans and stuff. Otherwise, for the most part, just leave your windows open and it's good. It's kind of like Bangalore, I guess.
And sweater kind of weather or no?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, great.
April, May is supposed to be the warmest months.
He's actually so WhatsApp is obviously building something pretty awesome around, leveraging payments in India, and
Right.
so they are actually innovating in India for the rest of the world.
Oh, cool.
And so he's driving a lot of the API integrations with a bunch of companies. They're doing some really cool stuff, really cool stuff, especially around payments.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, actually, from a jungle perspective, very good person to know. Hi, and I pray Vidi. Guys, I'm going to start in about 2-3 minutes. Rishab and I are just catching up, maybe around 8-5, and then we'll have people dropping in as we move along. So you should actually connect with him, Rishab. I'll connect. I'll connect you guys because I think.
Based?
I'm sorry.
I said, where is he based right now?
Bangalore.
Okay.
He's based in Bangalore, and he's originally from Dehradun, like I was saying.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Say again.
I said originally from Dehradun.
Ah, okay, cool, nice.
So
my wife school here, so from her,
I know your wife's from Wellams, right?
Yes.
So his wife's ex-Wellams.
Ah, cool.
His wife's name is Nandini Goel. Ask the wife. Maybe she'll know.
Yeah, my wife is not in the room, but if she were, she would have definitely raised her hand and said, "It's Wellam, not Wellams."
Oh, is it? Okay.
She gets very upset.
I stand. It's like when we were in school, right? Many people used to say Columbus, and I was like, no, it's not Columbus, it's Columbus. But now, eventually, I just gave up and stopped correcting people.
Yeah.
It's just frustrating. All right, man. Listen, I think we should get started in a minute or so.
Okay.
And I hope the link is working because the last time I did this, there was some challenge with the link, and the link didn't seem to work. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to just see if anybody's messaged me. Okay, looks like everything is working. All right, man. You're good to get going?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you are.
All right. Okay. For those of you who are here, and I think we'll have people coming in as we go through this. I hope everybody's staying safe. I think that's the most important thing here, right? Things are a bit nutty all around, and there are actually a bunch of people who are in the room right now, Rishab, who are getting out of COVID, right? So it's very important for everybody to just stay safe. So guys, many of you have been for some of the earlier shows. The goal of this show is very, very simple. It's really a open-ended exploration of the best startup ideas, talking to the best founders, best investors, essentially trying to create the India playbook, right? What works in India? How does it work? How do companies scale? And hopefully folks are able to take the insights from there and create their own playbook, right? Today's guest is actually somebody who's played multiple roles in the startup ecosystem. Rishab is currently a venture partner at Jungle Ventures. They're a huge VC fund out of Southeast Asia in Singapore. Most recently, right, prior to that, Rishab was actually one of the co-founders at Droom, right? And Droom, as many of you know, is amongst the largest Indian startups. Certainly, I would say amongst the couple of largest auto startups. Whether I don't think whether they are or not a unicorn. That's still open to interpretation, but they're doing incredibly well. Rishab joined them very early, helped them scale, and so has some incredible stories of how they got there. And just before that, he actually helped set up GSF. And for those of you who don't know, GSF stands for Global Super Angels Forum. It was one of the early, very active actually. I want to say sort of like Y Combinator-ish Indian Super Angels Forum. Has had some very, very successful bets as well. So Rishab, awesome dude. Welcome to the room. Let's dive into some of the experiences that you had.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I've heard some of your previous shows, so we're excited to be here.
All right, man. I'm to be completely transparent, I'm trying to experiment with different times and a bunch of things to see what's the right time to do this. And so some of the shows have teething troubles. We'll just see how this one goes. Okay. Now, so let's start with the founding story, right? When you were at Be Stylish, then after that you did some stuff. What made you connect with Droom when you were just 3-4 people? What made you think that there was something fundamentally interesting here, and it made sense, and there was an opportunity to grow this into a big startup?
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting story, Ryan. So I'll just put maybe 30-45 seconds of backdrop and then get into the story. I did my MBA in Singapore and launched my first startup in 2011. Built that for a couple of years. Started off pretty strong, and then made all the mistakes typical first-time founder would. We were able to sort of sell our startup to our first customer. It wasn't a
nice.
big happy ending, but I was very clear that I wanted to sort of commit to the technology and startup space. I had been based in Singapore, and we were looking to tackle Southeast Asia back then, which 600-700 million people after India and China. It was sort of the next frontier. But some of the challenges in Southeast Asia at the time were language barriers and differentiated mobile internet penetration. I don't know if you remember, at the time, Indonesia was the largest BlackBerry market in the world. Remember BlackBerry?
Yes.
So I one of the learnings from doing that business in Singapore was that better to be in one larger market instead of trying to maneuver complexities or that I described. And so I moved back to India, and that's when I met Rajesh, and he was setting up GSF Accelerator on the back of GSF Forum, which was just really an angel platform. And at the time, there were maybe 30-40 angel investors in India. And we would get them together and get startups to pitch to them. Had the idea to build an accelerator similar to Y Combinator and Techstars, and then spend the next couple of years building Be Stylish within Smile Group, where we met, and also focused on GSF. Probably met maybe 250 to 300 entrepreneurs in the next 2 years through GSF. Ran 3 batches of companies. Did a lot of advisory, a lot of mentorship, a lot of programming for the accelerator, and then sort of realized that I was ready to dive into the deep end of the pool again. And I was exploring different opportunities all within the startup space, some very early stage, some growth stage. Coincidentally connected with someone at Cardeco, and they sort of offered me a role to look at some of their international businesses, given my Southeast Asia experience. And then I was sitting down with a friend of mine who's been a very good friend and mentor, Sid Talwar, who now is at Lightbox. And I started telling him about the different options I had. And he was an angel investor in Shop Clues, which is Sandeep's prior venture. And he said that Sandeep has just started talking about building something in auto. Why don't you guys connect? And so November 2014 is when I met Sandeep, and he started talking about a transactional marketplace, an e-commerce model for used vehicles in India. And the moment we started talking about the industry and the opportunity here, I could see that picture very, very clearly. As a college student at the University of Texas at Austin, I missed many lectures bidding for different cars on ebaymotors.com, and over multiple months lost many auctions in the last second, and found a way to sort of quote unquote game the system, and pretty much figure out everything, every online tool around purchasing of automobiles in the US at the time, the pricing, the history, inspection tools, financing, logistics, fulfillment. And so when Sandeep started talking about this in 2014, 11 years later, I could see it very, very, very clearly. And after a few cycles of spending time together in the office, shadowing him in the office, talking about future plans, etc., I decided to come on board, and that's when it all began.
And that's awesome. And now, in terms of let's try and explore how this got started. At that point of time, there was already, let's say, OLX, right, and Cars Deco, which were more classifieds, right? That was possibly version 1 of auto commerce online. How was Droom going to be different at that point of time? Because you mentioned a couple of times that you guys were going to start a transaction-oriented platform.
Yeah. So actually, I think you're right. I think that was the first innings of auto tech in India. I think there were two models, right? One is the Car Deco, which and Car Trade, and Car Wale, which I really call discovery platforms, and that's basically going to your neighborhood magazine wala and buying an auto magazine and looking at side-by-side comparisons, ratings, and reviews. And because the platform was digital, you could do stuff around video content, etc. And so the Car Decos and the Car Wales of the world were focused on that. And then there were the classifieds, which is the OLX Quickers of the world. So dog wanted, accountant wanted, car for sale, house for rent. All like 100 categories on a very simple classifieds model, which was really the newspaper classifieds that eventually got digitized. So it was definitely an uphill task in the early days, and I think that's because of the way the industry was. We took a call to focus on B2C, so we started out focusing on used vehicles and the B2C market for used vehicles, which is 87% unorganized market in India, small mom and pop dealers selling two-wheelers and four-wheelers across different car and bike markets around the country. So, getting dealers to adopt the platform, getting dealers to adopt to a new model more than adopt the platform was a challenge, because we came in with a transactional model, as I said, where we get the buyer to pay a token amount for a vehicle that he or she likes, which is fully refundable. And after you pay the token, you get the contact information of the seller. Buyer and seller get 5 days to meet, test drive, do the documentation, and close the transaction. And in the event that that didn't happen, just like any other e-commerce model in India, we had 100% buyer protection, whereby we would refund the token, no questions asked, and within 3 days, your money is back in your bank account. But a couple of points that I think are useful here is number one, the existing models, whether you were an OLX or whether you were a Car Deco, if you were talking about used vehicles, you would broadly go to your dealer and ask them, okay, sir, how many cars do you have parked outside? Okay, you have 15, 20 cars. So, you take this 5,000 rupee a month package. I will send you 20 leads. These are all serious buyers. And then you can close them once they come to your door. So foot out the door, a classifieds player or a discovery player would go to a dealer and ask for money based on how much inventory they had. And so we took a very different approach there, because our model was transactional. Our pitch to the dealer was, look, you got one vehicle or you got 1,000, Droom offers you unlimited listings. List them all, keep updating them all day long as you buy and sell more inventory. And number two, and more importantly, we're only going to charge you if and when we sell something for you, right? If we don't sell anything for you, you don't have to pay anything to us. At the same time, we're giving you a phenomenal technology platform with a digital storefront that's open 24/7. You can, in less than 2 minutes, create a new listing for a product. We gave a bunch of different analytics around sales, around inventory, around payments, and a lot of technology tools, which now for an e-commerce merchant are very, very obvious, but at that time were definitely not, especially in the auto space.
Okay, so you get going with this. The challenge with building any so-called marketplace, right? And when I was building the startup where I was at, we had to build a large marketplace. One of the key challenge with building a marketplace is this chicken and egg, right? And you have to do it differently. Some people will supply, some people will demand. In this case, it was a little tougher, right? Because you are essentially getting a bunch of people online to do a transaction, which has not been done before. So when you guys were building the marketplace, right? So first question, did you guys think about building supply first or demand first? How did you guys go about it?
So I think in our mind, it was very, very clear. And that is that it's not a chicken and egg, and supply comes before demand. You have to have a catalog and inventory on the platform before you can go out and acquire a digital consumer on the back of it. Keep in mind, that with used vehicles, no two vehicles are the same, right? You want to buy a brand new Honda City, there are 3 variants, and the prices are all published anywhere. There's 100% transparency around the product. There's 100% transparency around the pricing and the inherent value of the product. In used vehicles, no two are the same. You take a 2012 Honda City with 50,000 kilometers in Bangalore versus Delhi, and you look at the condition and how many owners and multiple other factors, and the prices could vary significantly. So, for us, building supply was the most important. The way we thought about building supply was we started with Delhi NCR. Delhi NCR is about 27-28% of the overall auto industry in India. It's also a big hub for a lot of the northern states, from Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Himachal, Uttar Pradesh, Uttaranchal, going up to Jammu. It serves as a hub for vehicles being bought and sold in all across the north. So, in our mind, the first year we focused only on Delhi NCR, built supply around used 4-wheelers and used 2-wheelers, and used 2-wheelers was further bifurcated into scooters and motorcycles. And we went and focused on getting as many dealers and as many listings and inventory as we could on the platform. So that was sort of the go-to market, was to build supply first and generate demand. On the back of that, all our digital marketing efforts and initiatives were targeted to customers based on where we had inventory, and also merchandising the products that we had inventory for. For example, Bajaj Pulsar is the most commonly sold used 2-wheeler in India, and it was always an endeavor to make sure that the highest selling SKUs were available in plenty, because ultimately the marketplace is going to reflect the demand and sales that you see in the offline auto market. So that's kind of how we thought about it.
And did you guys think bikes versus cars? Did you make any trade-off there, saying we'll do bikes first or cars first? Was there any difference, or did you guys go in together?
No, so that's a good question, Ryan, and that's why the company, Sandeep coined the name Droom, it not Car Dekho or Bike Wale, and the reason for that is really that there is a much larger opportunity in the overall automobile space, whether it's going across categories and subcategories within auto, which is from premium cars to SUVs. There's so many different ways you can slice and dice the catalog, as well as if you look at the servicing market, right? Today you have auto tech companies that are focused only on aftermarket repair or aftermarket servicing or periodic maintenance, right? And so, that's why he called it Droom, so that it could be anything auto, anything with wheels, anything with an engine, or any service around it could be bought and sold on the platform.
But going in stage one, right? Was there any thought of whether it should be bikes first and then we expand into cars, or cars first and expand into bikes, or it was from day one, it was we will do bikes and cars both?
We'll do bikes and cars both, and we'll do used. A year and a half later, we launched new vehicles on the platform also. And over time, we added multiple service categories from financing, insurance, car care, detailing, servicing, a bunch of them, right? Any auto service that you would need for your vehicle. But going in, it was used four-wheelers and used two-wheelers bifurcated by scooters and motorcycles in Delhi NCR.
So that is actually very interesting. The reason I kept pushing you on this is very often a success of the marketplace depends on what you started with and then how you decided what to go second, third, fourth, right? So for example, not many people know that when Amazon started, it was very consciously a choice to start with books, right? And post that, it was very consciously a choice of saying, we will go with video gaming, right? Then we will go with music CDs, DVDs, and then we will go with electronics and everything, because the thought was, at each stage, when you start, you're coming up with very commoditized, very standard products. You get people into the habit, and then you go more. eBay, on the other hand, right? They started with just collectibles, saying that, okay, people who want stamps or people who want coins, they will want to keep trading, and so they will come back. So I think very interesting that you guys started with secondhand, and your point about picking the products that were going to sell the most offline is very important, because you build liquidity in that, right? If that's the thing that people are searching for most, that's very interesting. So great, we understand where you started, Rishab, but in any marketplace, I think like you mentioned, supply comes first, start in a particular market, build out NCR. The key problem with marketplaces, apart from, the chicken and the egg, supply or demand, however you want to talk about it, the key, once you have got that sorted out, is how do you build trust? Right? Because without trust, the transaction doesn't take place. It's much easier, like you said, to build a classifieds model, because there the level of, let's say, investment is very low. It's essentially like seeing an ad. You could see a flyer. But if you're transacting, then the need to build trust is super important. So how did you guys think about building trust, especially in a market like this, right, where the quantum is quite significant, that somebody is going to invest, even if you take an escrow amount upfront? So if you could just talk about some of those trust mechanisms, that would be super helpful.
Yeah. So no, that's a great question. And so starting, I'll give you a few examples, and then happy to double click in specific areas, right? So one of them, the first thing is a structured catalog. So every make, model, year, trim of a vehicle. An example is Honda City 2012 VXI, right? Or VMT, to speak Honda parlance. Was a drop down. So the entire catalog was structured to where whatever four-wheeler or two-wheeler you had, it was just a simple drop down. If you look at an OLX or another classified listing, you will see, you'll see a bunch of mumbo jumbo, right? Some people will capitalize some words, some people will not. The spacing is all messed up, and then because you have 150 characters or 250 characters, you'll start writing excellent condition, VIP number, mint condition first, all of that stuff, which just throws the buyer to a tailspin, right? If you ask me.
And difficult to compare.
Very difficult to actually compare apples for apples, right? Like maybe your search algorithms are decent, and you'll be able to somehow, on the back of searching, be able to list out all the different Honda cities together. But the ability to do anything on the catalog side, if it's structured and clearly defined, becomes very easy. So that was one, right? The second thing, that we realized was that we started building technology tools around trust and transparency. So what do I mean by that, right? We we spoke to, of course, a lot of different used car buyers, a lot of potential used car buyers, a lot of dealers. And from our research, looking at other markets as well, we found that in the initial years, pricing, vehicle history, and vehicle condition or inspection were the key pillars which were lacking trust and transparency in India, right? So we built a tool called Orange Book Value, which is India's first algorithmic used vehicle pricing tool. You go in there and you click, I want to sell, I want to buy, from an individual, from a dealer. You select the category, car, bike, scooter, make, model, year, trim, kilometers driven, and check price. And the tool will give you within a 5% bottom and top value what we think the price of that vehicle is. And because we have a transactional platform for buying and selling of these vehicles, that transaction data is being fed into those algorithms to constantly recalibrate pricing, right? So the idea is that at scale, that it very, very efficiently reflects actual market pricing. But starting out, we had to build algorithms where we assign all these vehicles on multiple depreciation curves and apply different market factors, etc., to calibrate the price. So pricing is a big one, right? Like if you just think about it, you go...
So like transparency in pricing, which makes a lot of sense, because in second-hand car market, that is really where the opacity lies.
Yeah. So like, if you just think about it, right? You have a budget of 15 lakhs. You want to buy a used 3 Series. You can like 2014, 15 BMW 320D, black color, 20,000 kilometers versus 60,000 kilometers, single owner versus 3 owners. Like, how do you tell? Like the variance is just massive, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't know where to begin. You know what the new car value is today. You can Google that. You can go to BMW's website and see what that value is. But how do you actually extrapolate what the inherent value of that used vehicle is? And so that's where Orange Book Value came in. What we did also, which I think was a very, very good move, was we made this tool fully integrated onto the Droom buy and sell flow. So what I mean by that is, let's say Ryan is selling this 4-year-old BMW. You think the value is 17 lakhs. You go and create the listing and you say it's 17 lakhs. But because we know make, model, year, trim, kilometers driven, we'll recommend to you and say, hey Ryan, we think the price of this vehicle is really 14.5 to 16.2 lakhs, right? But you're the seller. It's your car. You can sell it at whatever price you want. And similarly, if let's say Rishab is looking for that BMW and comes and looks at that listing, right? I can come and see that Ryan has listed it for 17, but Orange Book Value, OBV, is actually telling me that the price should be somewhere between 14.5 to 16.2. So, by positioning this tool on both sides of the marketplace, number one, and then we eventually created our own app for OBV, our own website for OBV, and we put together different partnerships because we realized that this was a pillar, of course, lacking that would drive further conversion and trust on Droom as a platform, but it was needed across the industry. So today, several OEM used car divisions use OBV, several auto blogs, we've even tried to go to the classified players, etc., and get them to use it, because ultimately on the back of an API integration, if you have a catalog, you can query the OBV database and it can just spit out a price in a second and a half. So, and by the way, today we've seen live to date 492 million pricing queries on OBV. So it's one of the largest search engines.
So it's 492 million.
Yes.
That is nuts.
It's a free tool. See, that's the point, right? Now, of course, every time you create a listing, you're querying it every time a buyer sees a listing. But if you look at the traffic on the websites, on the apps, and across platforms outside of the Droom ecosystem, those also contribute to this. But yeah,
But that's a great hack.
6.5 years out, for almost 500 million queries. I think that's pretty powerful, right?
That's a great hack. And this is the beauty about talking to people who have scaled marketplaces, because you'll always realize that behind the marketplace, behind the go-to market, there are a couple of very critical decisions, and of those decisions, a handful really are the ones that drive scale. I don't know if you know this, but this is exactly what Zillow has done in the US, right? Zillow built this tool saying that you can fundamentally get a quotation for your house wherever you are, anywhere in the US. And people kept playing around with that, sharing it to social, in a way very much like the OBV that you are talking about. Now, I wanted to push this thought a bit further, because when we were talking a little earlier, one of the things you mentioned is that you guys didn't stop there, right? Over time, you guys integrated with a whole bunch of different data tools,
Yeah.
and you almost had like a story behind every car. So when somebody launched, you could see a lot more than just what the OBV book value was. You could see stuff that was customized to that car as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I was going to come to that. So the first tool was pricing, and that was OPV, and that's the approach that we took. The second tool was history, right? So when I was talking about the factors lacking from a trust transparency perspective, pricing, vehicle history, how many owners has this vehicle really had, right? Is it an accidental vehicle? Has it ever been impounded by the police? Does it currently have a loan or not? All of this data is very, very difficult to get. You got to go to the RTO, give the registration number. You might get back some information. And so what we did is we put together different partnerships to source this data. We had a partnership which gave us data from 1,100 RTOs across India, where if you search just the registration number of the vehicle, you can get from 4 to 40 different data points on that particular vehicle, including whether it's registered to an individual or a company, right? Similarly, number of owners, insurance, loan. Sometimes you can also, depending on who your partners are, we went to OEMs and tried to get them to give us service logs, right? So you're buying a used car at 15 lakhs, it's a BMW, it's 4 years old. You want to know, has this been serviced only at the factory? Has it been serviced outside by a roadside guy, and what parts, etc., have been changed? So if the vehicle has gone to the OEM, you should be able to just on the back of the vehicle, on the back of the registration number, pull all that service history. All of this is very, very important when you go out to buy a used vehicle. So we launched Droom History, right? And Droom History was basically the tool that gave you between 4 to 40 data points on 200 plus million vehicles in India based on the registration number. How many data points they were really depended on how much information we were able to calibrate for that vehicle number based on the different data sources that we pulled together underlying Droom history.
Awesome. So OBV, which is the first thing that so we are talking about how do you build trust in a marketplace, because that is what defines the liquidity in a marketplace, and trust is really the key currency. It's very difficult to build in a transactional marketplace, and we're trying to understand how did Droom do this. So 2 points covered so far, Rishab. One is you talked about creating the OBV and saying, okay, the person who is, so the first thing you did was the most opaque part of this is pricing. By creating OBV, you said, okay, this price is in line with what should be paid, right? By building OBV into the transaction flow, which is awesome. The second thing that is incredibly opaque in the used car marketplaces is the history of the car, right? Because in the example that you talked about, which is myself, Vishal, I have a BMW to sell, 3 series, 3 years, blah, blah, blah. All is good, even the price is good, but you don't know whether the guy has bashed up the BMW 5 times. Has it been in an accident? Has he been in a fight with it? God knows. And so you build this Droom history, which is great. But I also want to touch upon the escrow part of it, right? Because when you fundamentally are taking payment, by taking only part payment and keeping in escrow, that gives the buyer a significant amount of comfort, right? So can you just explain the pricing model and why you guys did this escrow pricing versus, let's say, just doing something else?
Yeah. But before that, I want to talk about the third tool, which is where I was going, if you allow me.
Sure.
and I think there's an important learning there as well. So pricing, history, and the third was inspection. So how did you use car? How did you figure out what the condition of the car you gave her 200 rupees and you said, boss, how did they go? Tell me something again, right. The word is around, you have no idea what the thing is doing. And then you tell you one or two things to also typically understand. So how do you create a process and a platform around vehicle inspection? This was only one tool which required a person to go to the vehicle wherever the vehicle is parked and open what we call Eco, which is our app. And there again we created a very clear defined flow where from onboarding of an inspector on Eco, he had to go through different content around the inspection, pass an exam and score a certain score to be able to become an Eco certified technician. And then when he reached the car, he would start the inspection and he would just go question by question, and all you're doing is scoring using drop downs and rating on 1 to 10 or good, bad, poor, etc. to bring in objectivity into the inspection process. Based on the answers that the inspector would provide, we would give a score of 1 to 10. That score would be fed into OBV and would recalibrate the price on the inspection report. So the condition, the history, and the pricing from early days were the three pillars of trust. The important learning here is that actually 2 years later, I want to say maybe 18 months into the journey, for us, these are all three children that we loved equally, right?
Right.
And we realized when we were I think we were raising series B or C, and we were talking to several investors in Hong Kong and talking about trust, used car market, etc. And then, there was a light bulb moment after a string of meetings where people were like, okay, this history thing, you just like, forget this thing. Let's just talk about pricing. How does this work? How does the algorithm work? How do you distribute this to the ecosystem? How does it get smarter? How does the transaction data flow into it? And then we realized that, wait a minute, this one is completely different from the other two. And this one and each of these three need different approaches to get into, to make them sticky in the marketplace and to scale across the industry. And that's when we actually went out and did a massive campaign around pricing. We created a new logo for Orange Book Value. We came up with a tagline which we called Resale Ka MRP.
Interesting.
we ran. There are some phenomenal, if you go to YouTube and you just search OBV ads, there are some phenomenal TV ads as well as digital ads that we did. There's one which, Ryan, you might enjoy also growing up in Delhi. There's one where there's two guys playing Diwali Tash at like 4 in the morning, and he runs out of money for his next chal, so he drops his sort of car key and he's like, 4 lakh ki chal. And
interesting. I know where this is going.
And then the other one starts saying, "What's wrong with you? That car ain't worth 4 lakhs. Like, I didn't pay more than 2 for it." And then they have this big debate. And then the OBV thing kicks in and says that, do you want to know what the true value of the used car is? Check out OBV, resale by MRP, right? So
awesome.
So the point that I'm making is that I guess we realized that this one was very different from the others. And that's when we did a big marketing splash around it. We launched the OBV dedicated app website, and we launched a partnership strategy to scale OBV to other stakeholders in the ecosystem. A few years later, we had an enterprise version of OBV, which is used by banks and NBFCs around the country. Because if you think about it, if you're going to get a used car loan from HDFC Bank or from Capital Float, how do they know what the real value is? They're not in the car business. They again,
that's true.
An inspector, he'll go to do the car and he'll say, boss, broadly it's fine. But the underwriter doesn't really know the inherent value. And so an extrapolation of that same thinking around pricing and really the power of that led to the creation of an enterprise product, which is where you, as a bank, there's a SaaS tool, you would upload make model year trim in an Excel template,
Brilliant.
at a time, and boom, one click, all the prices spit right back at you. So you know, pricing history inspection, but pricing was very, very different from the others. We realized that many months later, and then sort of differentiated the approach between the three.
Awesome. I think we can do a whole 1 hour on just tools that you guys did to create trust. But I am going to move on. But before I move on, Rishab, I want to point something which we didn't point out earlier, which
Hmm.
is that you guys went B2C, which is actually quite counterintuitive, right? Because when you are looking at a used car business, bulk of the used car sales is C2C. And I know we don't have time to cover this today, but I just want for the people listening in, one of the reasons that these guys decided to go B2C is they realized that in C2C, you don't have a repeat customer, right? None of the customers are repeating. Everybody's buying a used car maybe once in in India, maybe once in 5 years, who knows? But if you're going B2C, the vendor, the seller, he is incentivized to be a good participant, right? Because he is hopefully going to use, or she is going to use Droom to sell multiple cars. And so by inherently doing that, one party was very incentivized to behave in a very trustworthy manner. And so that also ties into trust. All right. Rishab,
Yeah,
if you allow me, I'm going to just reset the room, dude, and then let's continue. Let's talk about how we scale this, right? So
sure.
resetting the room, guys. I'm having a chat with Rishab on the Huddle. Rishab played many roles. He's been a VC, angel investor. We're talking about his time as a co-founder at Droom. And Rishab has phenomenal insight about building and scaling a marketplace in India. We've talked about how Droom got started, what are some of the decisions that they took early on, which really helped them. We spent a lot of time talking about trust because trust is central to making a marketplace work. And now, Rishab, I'm going to actually switch gears and talk about how do you scale, right? So you had this model working. You said
Yeah,
you worked this model out in the NCR, right? Being the 28 or 30%, whatever you said,
yeah,
one of the largest markets. Now the temptation is always to say, okay, this is actually a local business. I'm going to scale this up physically, locally across the country. But you guys didn't do that. You guys said, we're going to have an asset light distribution model, and we are going to scale this actually remotely before I suppose even remote was a thing. And you scale this up across the country without having a physical presence in most of the cities that you scale to. So let's talk about how did you scale, right? What was the thinking that went into saying, let's scale, but let's do it remotely? Maybe we start from there.
yeah. No, and I think that's a good question. You know, Sandeep and I would have a bunch of conversations around this, and I would be the one to, batting for having some physical presence. Not, I don't mean retail centers and operation centers, but more people, because of the underlying fragmentation in the used vehicle market in India. But the way we did it is that we realized, so Delhi NCR, then we took top 10 cities and then top 25 cities and then scale onwards from there. And we came up with an acquisition engine, right? This acquisition engine was a function of many different things. The first one was a telecalling team. We would scrape car dealer data from everywhere we possibly could. And we would have telecallers calling up dealers in Bombay, in a Bangalore, and they would be supported by a launch team. So we took one from Uber's playbook, and Uber was expanding very aggressively at that time, and they had this concept of a launch team, which were basically hunters that would just go city to city to city, launch the city, get it up and running, fold it into the engine, and move on. And so we built that engine, or that acquisition engine that I was talking about, where there was people who acquired and signed up dealers, people who onboarded them. There was basic KYC, bank account, etc., financial KYC that needed to be done, and then account manager. So every active dealer, and an active dealer is defined as someone who has at least 2 listings on the marketplace, was mapped to one account manager, and that's the engine that we built. Then when we talked about expanding to other markets, we had a concept of a launch team that would go in and get the first 50 to 100 dealers per market, roll it into the engine, and then whether it was acquisition team which sat in headquarters or it was account management team that was already mapped to dealers, would keep trying to get more and more and more referrals and get them to sign up and get their inventory on the platform. At the same time, we created Droom University, and we created hundreds and hundreds of hours of content around how to set yourself up for success on Droom, how to create the perfect listing, what is the billing and payments policy, how to deal with the customer once a token amount has been paid, how often do the payments get out, what do you do if you need technical support on the app. So all of these things you don't want to just have coming into a call center with 200 people sitting there answering queries. You got to come up with a more scalable, technology driven approach to actually solve some of those problems. So that's the approach we took, Ryan. I was part of the launch team for the first 20 cities. I would go with one guy from account management, one guy from acquisition, and maybe one other. We would just take a flight to Bombay, take an auto or a cab to the auto market, the bike market, or the four-wheeler market, and carry a bunch of collaterals around Droom, around how it works, and go out and just sit door to door, sit in dealer stores, wait for them to give us 20 minutes. They would give us time. We would talk about the platform. And here again, the fact that it was unlimited listings, you don't pay anything until you sell, made our life a lot easier. So even if the dealer didn't really see that much merit in it, no one's going to say no, right? They'll just be like, okay, fine, here, sure. I got 20 cars, right? Let's list them on the platform. And so that's how we scaled supply. One other, I think, relevant point, and I think we touched upon this when you and I spoke, was really around the supply side engagement model, right? So launch would be, like I described, going door to door and onboarding dealers, or then we would do what we called a seller roadshow, where literally we would go and set up a small little tent with Droom branding. We would have a fishbowl where everyone could come and put their business cards, and every 1 hour there'd be a lucky draw, and we'd give away a small Moto G Android phone. And we would use that opportunity to attract as many dealers from the car market or bike market that were in to come to the stall, to put their cards, to hear about the platform, to take the collateral, and hopefully for us to acquire and onboard some of them right there on the spot. So this launch plus roadshow model worked very well for us as we got out of Delhi NCR. And then once we had multiple dealers impaneled with us, right, we would do what we called seller meets. And a seller meet was typically 30 to 50 dealers. We would rent a small three-star, four-star banquet hall in a hotel near one of these car markets across different cities, and we would go out and serve them tea, snacks, and do a 40-minute presentation on Droom, the platform, how these tools of pricing, history, inspection work, how a dealer can be set up for success, and then have another half an hour, 40 minutes for people to have a cup of tea, talk, do Q&A, and just talk about the industry. Used vehicle dealers are typically very, very low level of tech savviness. Most of them, a lot of them, not even sort of graduated from high school. So even a platform or a community where they could meet their peers, have a snack, have something to drink, and talk to people like us about what the future of the industry is, what we're seeing on digital and how technology is transforming it, was very, very powerful. And so that was sort of seller meets where we brought on board 40, 50 dealers that were working with us and got to engage more deeply with them. And then we expanded that into a seller summit, which was really like the Oscars for used vehicle dealers, right? So, and you might laugh hearing that, but I think the point is that, we would host a North India seller summit where 600 to 800 dealers would come from 5 states neighboring Delhi NCR, drive in, bring their families, and we'd organize an evening where there'd be, a booth from every team in Droom, catalog, digital marketing, business development, finance, etc., where they could go booth to booth, ask any questions that they wanted. There would be, panel discussions from the management team talking about the platform, what we're seeing. And at the end of the evening, there would be, dinner, drinks, entertainment, and awards, where we would use that as an opportunity to award our best, most engaged dealers, our best performing dealers, the ones who were best with updating store manager. Store manager was the digital showroom that we gave them. And what was amazing was that it was a moment of great pride for a lot of them when they got many of these awards. They would take those awards, put them in their dealership, and stick them up on the walls for a while. As I said, they would bring in their family members, because if you look at the demographic of these folks, nothing like this ever existed in the industry, and it gave them an opportunity to learn so much, interact with so many of their peers, and also get recognized. So all of these things were all, it's easy for me now to 5 years later articulate them in a few minutes, but all of these things took many nights of rigorous work, from conceptualizing to putting the teams together to designing the collaterals to the travel logistics and planning around it. But we did see a lot of success through some of these.
So that's the supply side, right? Just quickly touching on the demand side, I think one of the other things that you guys did when you scaled was making it okay to buy a used car, right? Through some of the ads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What was that one ad we were talking about, Rishab? The husband wife on it. Yeah,
the first TV ad we did was a husband and wife in a car, and they're driving home, and he's like, I think I'm going to buy this car, but it's a used car, and she's like, so what's wrong with used? Like, I was your second girlfriend too, or something along those lines, right? And for us,
very insightful.
For us, it was like, let's attack that stigma, right? There was a stigma around used items, used vehicles, and why is it that in 2015 in a market like India, at that time it was 1.2 used cars to 1 new car sold, but in the US it was 2.2, in Germany it was 2.5, 2.7, and a lot of it was, of course, these trust tools and platforms that provided that to the buyer and seller, but some of it was also cultural. So for us, we wanted to really attack that, and so a lot of our TV ads would be around that. Our taglines around a lot of our marketing promos, etc., would be like Droom, Bindas Ghoom. And then it would say something like Nahi Wali feeling. Our email marketing that would go to you when you bought a car would have words around this to give the customer a little bit more confidence in the purchase. I did, you talked about the escrow question and the token amount, and I think that's very, very important as well, because 100% buyer protection, your token amount refunded, no questions asked if you don't like the vehicle, and then later we strapped on many other things to that if you paid a token and bought a used vehicle, we would throw in a roadside assistance package, we would throw in a 6-month used vehicle warranty, and other bells and whistles to build trust on the demand side.
Awesome, man. Takes a lot to build a marketplace. Guys, by the way, I'm going to wrap up very soon. So if anybody has any questions of Rishab, just raise your hands. He has obviously a wealth of information, and if not, then we'll wrap up very quickly. So Rishab, I want to wrap this up by asking you 2 questions, right? One is, given where we are and what you've seen, if you were to look through the crystal ball and say 10 years later, right? So let's say 2030, what would the Indian online, let's say, digital auto construct look like? How is it going to look different from what it is today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ryan. And, I'll do my best at sort of projecting something at you. But, the simple way to answer that question is that it looks a little bit like you see the evolution of e-commerce, right? If you look at evolution,
okay, that's interesting.
You'll see horizontal players like Amazons and Flipkarts initially dominate the market, and then later on you see the verticals develop, right? Whether it's furniture, baby, fashion, electronics, so on and so forth, right?
Cosmetics,
cosmetics, what have you, right? So and similarly, we think that firstly, we think that new, used, electric, autonomous, whatever you want to call it, you need a marketplace to buy and sell, right? So it's not going anywhere, number one. Number two, I think those verticals will become much more evolved, and you will see multi-billion-dollar companies getting created within those verticals. What do I mean by that? There might be platforms that are only focused on aftermarket parts or servicing, right? If you look at the Chinese auto market today, there are 8 to 10 multi-billion-dollar digital assets in auto that are either, let's say, a B2C like us, or a C2C, or a C2B like a Cars24, right? Or a B2B, like B2B auctions platforms for vehicles. And now I haven't even gone into parts, OEM parts versus OES parts, or servicing, or other automobile services like vehicle telematics. So I see a lot. I think this is, we're in the second innings for Indian auto tech. The first one was discovery and classifieds. The second one is where you can start transacting online. And now, as we peel the onion down, you're going to see a lot more depth starting to emerge in each of those categories, and vertical players starting to emerge. Think about insurance, think about financing, right? All of these for auto could potentially be obviously great acquisition targets for us if they do a better job than we do, but also could scale up to become sizable businesses in the future.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw out a projection, and then I'm going to ask you my favorite question of the night. I think one of my projections is that I do believe that at least a couple of the Indian players will have emerged as global players, maybe across the Middle East, Africa, maybe Southeast Asia as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Droom is one of them, right? As one of the international leading players, because the used car market in India is quite unique. It's large. It's, once you build out the playbook here, easy to go into some of these other markets. All right, Rishab, last question of the night. Then I'm going to throw this open to questions. I think Paresh has one question, then wrap up. So the question is this: given what you've seen at Droom, maybe GSF at Madison Capital, and also where you are now at Jungle, what are some of the things that, based on your experience, you have seen, and so you know and you take for granted, but maybe we don't know, or we won't believe, or the common man does not see this? So what are some of your earned insights reflecting on everything that you've done?
Wow, that's a tough one. Okay, let me try to give you a couple. I think one is just how I answered the previous question around the depth that will emerge, right? I read something in the news yesterday about Tiger Global potentially putting $50 million in Go Mechanic, right?
Wow, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, Go Mechanic is just aggregating long tail of garages that you have in India and giving the consumer the ability to get their car fixed or serviced in those garages, right? Similarly, one of our VPs at Droom started a company called Fixcraft, which is a cloud garage where they're saying that, hey, we don't want to do a marketplace, because given the solution we want to give, given the SLA in terms of picking up your car, fixing, servicing it, and bringing it back, I don't trust the aggregator and downstream garage to do it. So I'm going to do it myself in a full stack model, right?
Interesting.
And the amazing thing is that they have a line of used car dealers, insurers, NBFCs, etc., wanting to partner with players like these to be able to say, hey, I get, anyone who has vehicle insurance, eventually your car is going to get scratched or banged up, and if it's not in the first 2-3 years, you're not going to go to the authorized dealer. And you don't want to go to the guy on the street, because that guy, that's a whole new ball game dealing with that. So one is the depth that's going to emerge within different parts of auto tech, and I think having spent many years in the industry, we can see that very, very clearly. The second thing is that, I think that in the early days, the approach that we took, which is asset light, people light, focused on technology and a marketplace, was very different from the others, right? You have other players, Cars24 is one. They recently became a unicorn. They buy vehicles from a consumer, C2B. They give you cash on the spot for your car. Great proposition to a consumer, some would say. But in terms of a business model, you're spending a ton of your capital, right? And on very, very core things of your business running, which is buying the inventory, setting up physical retail centers, having an operations teams to park and drive those cars overnight in different places. Imagine a city like Bombay, you have 4 centers where you're buying cars all day long. Where are you going to park them, right?
Yeah.
Think about the operations involved. And then the second thing is that these are all depreciating assets that are just sitting there in one
Oh,
place.
yeah.
So that is too core to the business to be reliant on external capital for. We spent a ton of money on marketing, right? A lot of money that we raised, we spent on marketing, on brand building. But if the tide turned, we could dial that marketing down, and it was not going to flip the whole business over its head, right? So I think that is the second learning, and I think that differentiation only becomes apparent at scale, right? In year one, year two of the business, you're like, yeah, whatever. This one is selling so many cars. This one is selling so many cars. This one's net revenue is this. This one net revenue is this. But now, when you take that forward 5 years and 50, 70 cities, right, where you have transactions happening on the platform, then you really start to see some of those economies of scale setting in based on the marketplace approach. The other thing, last point, on the marketplace and managed marketplace is that we went from marketplace to slightly managed marketplace, and the reason was that we want to control every touch point for the consumer. So the first touch point is how I acquire you. You see a TV ad, a Google ad, a Facebook ad. You click through, you come to the website. There are trust tools on the platform that will hopefully give you the confidence to transact. But what happens then, right? For many, many years, our involvement stopped right there. Buyer and seller had to contact each other, meet offline. What happens? Does the transaction close? Why did it close? Why did it not close? Some of that information was harder to gather. And so now we have gone to a more managed marketplace approach where we get involved in that fulfillment and last mile. So we control the first mile and we control the last mile, and those effectively are every customer touch point. Because let's face it, we brought the customer, the dealer bought the supply, right? So every touch point for the consumer is controlled by us, and what happens in between, the customer doesn't really care about, right?
Very interesting. I think the last one is very interesting, that if you try and control the touch points at the start and at the end, where the customer is most concerned, what happens in the middle is less important. Awesome, Rishab. These were phenomenal points. Paresh, you've come up. Did you have a quick question before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I think it was really nice, Rishab. It was, very insightful, lot of learnings which we saw. And in Mahindra's also, we had a similar journey as far as, Mahindra Freshers Wheels is concerned. So, I'll really compliment you. A key question from our side, Rishabh, is, what do you look forward from a finance company like us, Mahindra Finance?
So, we didn't get into this too much, but there's two things that we did. The first three pillars of trust were pricing history inspection. We went from 2-3 categories to 40 categories, every auto service possible. And then we kind of zoomed back in on auto services that focused on the transaction. And what that means is basically anything that you can bundle together with the buy-sale process. And that's where financing came in. We launched financing where we took a marketplace approach first, tied up with different lenders and sent them all the way from just leads for used vehicle loans to being able to complete those transactions online. And then subsequently, we went and acquired a small NBFC to build out our own loan book. We do work with third-party financiers as well. And so for anyone that's in the used vehicle financing business, we say, hey, if you find value in our enterprise tools for pricing, history, and inspection, please use them. If you would like to source used vehicle loans or used two-wheeler loans through the platform, we are more than happy to partner on that as well.
Awesome, Rishab. This was super helpful, guys. I'm going to just summarize my key learning. I think that for me, the two themes that weave across everything that was discussed is at each point of time, what these guys did was they kept creating more mechanisms to fuel deeper trust, right? Whether it be the escrow payment, so you're not paying much upfront, whether it be the OBV, whether it be the history, whether it be the echo, whether it be training folks, building trust on the consumer side by doing these ads, building trust on the supplier side by doing these sort of events, whole bunch of things. And what is interesting for me was at each point of time in the scale journey, the questions that came which needed trust to be built were completely different on a different scale. So I think building trust was one key theme, and the other one was how they constantly removed friction. And by constantly removing friction, all the way up to the end, where Rishab said, they took them 5 years to realize that, hey, we should own the first touch point and the last touch point and remove the friction there. That cements trust and makes it a completely seamless experience. What has been fascinating for me to learn today is this is a market where one would assume that really offline cannot be beaten, right? You want to touch and you want to feel the car, you want to feel the bike. And this is something that's so totally built for offline. But through this experience, what at least what I've come away with is actually digital is a much more superior experience. You can have trust, you can remove friction, and if one can build such a large marketplace in a market like this, my sense is there is no real area that digital cannot trust and where a marketplace cannot be built. Rishab, I have to say this was one of my favorite sessions. I echo what Paresh said. I think the amount of depth of insight that we've learned here is fascinating. A lot packed in just 1 hour. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you all so much. We see you guys next Wednesday. All right, Rishab. Cheers, dude. Have a
Thanks
great
a lot.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.